It's May the 5th, 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear-proctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's doing good on this Thursday. Start off with a poll today. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency be disbanded and replaced immediately? I see we have a mass of 4 people on our live show. If you work really hard for over a decade at this, you too could have up to 5 people on your live show. Or 4. Actually started off with 1 person. It hurts a little bit to... That's the industry that censors you. Otherwise, I'd have 30,000 people here on my show if I was full of crap and nonsense. But if you talk, or if I talked up nuclear, if I said the words that nuclear had some kind of redeeming qualities in my shows, and be hundreds of thousands of people waiting for my live show. And I probably would have raised at least $2,000 in the chat, the super chat, before the show goes live. And I'd be invited on all kinds of major media and podcasts. Even TEPCO would probably blog me out. But because I'm just an honest person and I'm bringing you information that you better get your minds around, because nobody else is going to educate you. And you are in real trouble on this planet, and this is your one chance to get it right. You're not going to get a second chance. This is not like a driver's license or college degree or whatever the case may be. You've got to get it right this first time out. The future of all species are dependent upon you. And your loved ones and your friends and your families and your personal health is dependent upon you identifying the monsters. And the industry can't survive criticism if they're going to censor the only person on the planet that has a nuclear talk show. It tells you how desperate the industry is and how mismanaged this industry has become. There's no management, there's no checks and balances. Anybody thinks the International Atomic Energy Agency, think about that, those words though: international, worldwide, atomic energy agency. This is absurd to suggest that a single agency should be the arbiter worldwide of this industry. It's absurd when the group that we're talking about is actually 195 militaries. Okay, so they've been hammering the Pacific Ocean with radioactive fallout. I'm going to take you through the tanks. I'm going to take you from 2011 all the way up to now on, and you're not going to find this information on your own, period. And you're certainly not going to find it at universities or medias or the International Atomic Energy Agency. So first off, if you're not familiar who I actually am, I'm well known worldwide, and this is why I'm censored so heavily. What you're seeing to the right is a depiction of where I've done research expeditions for many, many years because of Fukushima, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And I do this each year anyway. I also do this each year. I can't show you something when there's nothing there to be seen, I suppose. And so you can fill the beach up with people, and the species to your left are permanently exterminated. That's from British Columbia and Alaska, will be the exact same. The species to your left, that you'll never see those species again. They are permanently eradicated because of Japan. And Japan, or in the nuclear industry, has committed crimes against humanity and an omnicide against all species. And we don't have anybody on the planet to fill in for what I'm doing. In other words, there's no one to actually replace me to help educate the population with this kind of documentation and these kinds of research expeditions. And the first half of these expeditions I had done, I was actually in a wheelchair. I shouldn't have been doing it, but it had to be done. And lost the wheelchair overboard in a storm. I couldn't get a replacement, and I decided to continue on. And it's been a long journey. And recently, last week, I got sick. It turned out to be I couldn't get in to see a doctor because of the jabs. But it turns out basically to be a kink in my intestine or my bowels, I'm not sure. But it was debilitating, and I was pretty sure I was actually going to die from it. And 2 days ago, I posted a video about 3 Mile Island, and I was lying in bed sleeping for about 60 hours straight. I got up finally sat up for about 2 hours. A few hours later, I clicked on the Fukushima cycle, 24-hour cycle, and I seen a story that about Netflix was going to run 3 Mile Island mini documentary of 4 episodes starting the next day. So I posted a replay from 2021 that doesn't exist on YouTube because YouTube took down my main channel when I was doing a spider, insect, and bird species count last year. And I posted the video, and I actually prayed to God that it wasn't fair that there was no one that was able or in a position or the will or the know-how to fight against this death cult known as nuclear industry. And I said how unfair it was that, I accept whatever happens to me, but I think I should be allowed to continue to fight. And I felt incredible pain that brought me up on my right side and actually made me stand up. Went into the bathroom to try to have a bit of a just a urine, because that's all I was able to accomplish, which was great. And laid down again and passed out and woke up yesterday morning. Slept right through everything, not a single... and I had slept on my back, by the way, for 4 days, just before we jump into the show. And I woke up, it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I knew that whatever that pain was I felt last night was my intestines or my bowel on kinking. And what happened when that happened was my stomach, I wasn't able to sit down, I couldn't stand up, I couldn't lie down, but I can walk around in circles for 4 or 5 hours. And it was in real distress. I was sweating heavy and blah, 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 blah. And your body tells you when you're in danger. Like I lost my spleen in a motorcycle accident, and I knew that my body, I was only a kid, but my body told me I needed to get in that hospital and get surgery immediately. As a kid, I understood. My body told me, you get back on that destroyed bike and you go out, find the first house, and you go in there. And I went in that first house I came across. I drove in their garden, and I couldn't even get off the bike. I just fell down with the bike. The bike was destroyed. They recognized it. They actually picked me up, put me in their car, and took off to the hospital with me. And the doctor said I had about 20 more minutes to survive, right? But my body had told me. It was the same thing when I got sick last week. And so when I woke up yesterday morning, it was the strangest thing. I actually understood that I was going to be okay. I had no illusions. And sure enough, I started tentatively trying to get a cup of tea, stood up straight, and I still couldn't believe what was going on, that I was called up my sister, said, hey, I'm okay. And I was actually going to put out a video last night and let you folks know, but I passed to. Let's jump into the show, because I'm sure a lot of people don't want to hear this kind of stuff, but I'll pick up more at the end of it for you, and appreciate the comments on the video. Okay, so Japan is going to dump. They're calling TEPCO is not a decommission authority. They don't. The idea is to blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry. They're the scapegoat. They don't exist anymore. They've been nationalized after the multiple nuclear meltdown, the world's worst nuclear disaster in history. So they allegedly got 1,000 tanks. Now, they had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,200 tanks in 2014. I'll show you all that kind of documentation. We counted the tanks. There's actually 750. And that includes, if you count the little small tanks, like those right there, the blue ones. Okay, so 2013, Japanese government criticizes TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority, of poor management, of leaks. Calling it Fukushima leaks is it's just absurd. Here's what, say, reactor 3 looked like. Does that look like it's going to leak to anybody? Sorry. Does that look like it's leaking? Remember, this was a 190-foot building. And by the way, that's reactor 4, what's left of it to the left. Does that look like it's leaking or hemorrhaging? You know what I mean? I'll show you some of that coming up. Hopefully I'll last that long. I'm doing really good, by the way. I'm on the road recovery. I should have probably waited till Sunday. or Monday and done the show. But you know, my life is invested in what I do. This is 24/7 for me and for the planet, obviously. But for me, the only way to tell this story and keep on top of it is complete commitment. No friends, no associates, I don't have hobbies. I'm completely, well, I play guitar, I play banjo, but it's stress relief for me. I've been doing it since I was a child, and I play violin and mandolin too, but I like guitar and banjo. I probably should get back into violin and mandolin, I suppose. TEPCO officials cannot estimate how frequent water will be discharged from multiple nuclear meltdowns. For the next month, radiation levels of the stored water, this is 2013, if the groundwater contains less than 1 becquerel per liter of cesium-134 and cesium-137. 1 becquerel is a single atom. And so you can put, and it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for who knows. Forget the word cesium, because that's the cover story, by the way. And so is iodine. And so is unisieverts, microsieverts, millisieverts, etc., etc. These are the cover stories when they're applied to your communities or to your cells. And 5 becquerels per liter of beta. So cesium is a gamma. And so you have betas, alphas, neutrons also. And so you have gamma, alpha, neutron, betas, and they pulse energy at the speed of light, but they can't mix. So when the pulses hit each other almost at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, they'll change direction. And that's known as an X-ray, a breaking, a Bromson lung effect. And it creates an X-ray effect. Sterilizes, all of this will sterilize the insects, mammals, animals, in increments, birds over time. And they slowly start to disappear. And eventually your friends and family say, well, there never was many insects and there never was many birds. These tanks, you can see these prefabricated panels, and you can see the lips on it. This is where they bolt them together. This was a ludicrous. The whole idea of the tanks was to trick you. I can explain that in great detail as we get through this. TEPCO is still struggling to keep its head above the contaminated waters at Fukushima. So remember, 1 becquerel per liter of cesium and 5 becquerels per liter of barium. And first off, 1,500. Notice how they put 1,500 becquerels of tritium, but 1 becquerel of. This is absurdness. So the laboratory tests were showing 8.7 million becquerels per liter. So imagine what a gallon of this, if it was sitting here, would already have killed me before I made it this far into the show from the shine coming from it. 8.7 million becquerels of tritium, 2.35 billion becquerels of cesium, 750 million becquerels of other radioactive material, like curium and uranium, plutonium and americium. The biggest byproduct of this event would have been curium isotopes. That's why they call it melted reactor curium core, because it's biggest byproduct. Now they're talking about this per liter. These are absurd numbers. So these are the tanks, the inside of the tanks. This is the floor of one of the tanks, for instance. And you can see the denigration. Now, you see this channeling they got there. So when you're, think about this number here. This is just a fraction of what's in that liter, by the way. So when that ends up here, the particles, like, you know, if I take particles and put it in water and stir it up, and I just walk away, when I come back, a lot of that is going to settle on the bottom, right? That's what's going to happen here with the radioactive material. My apologies. And so that'll cause a chain reaction in the tank. It'll burn a hole through the tank, and the stuff will run out. We've seen this in Mayak. We've seen this in Windscale. We've seen this at I can't even remember. I'll get to it. Okay, so this is to try to help you wrap your mind around how crazy the industry actually is. This is from November the 4th, 2013. An elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield the students from radiation. Well, what happens when they leave the school and go back home? What happens to them when they walk into the school and walk out of the school? Think about those questions and every other question appropriate. This is Koriyama City in Fukushima Prefecture, 34 miles west of the Fukushima Daiichi. Multiple nuclear reactor meltdowns. I'll get and show you. They're trying to shield radiation coming from the courtyards and other areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes, which are stacked around the classroom. So I'm pretty sure that's. I heard you wrong. You didn't say classroom. So inside and outside the classroom, the school, in desperation, rather than evacuate the students like a normal human, the IAEA won't let them evacuate. And so they have bottles stored around there. Are filled with water, placed inside of square boxes. They're stacked around the classroom. And according to the school, it seemed to reduce the radiation shine by 1/3. They have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive material that's been found around their community, but the industry has tricked and deceived them. So Koriyama, according to the SCUM United Nations Scientific Committee, they should be disbanded immediately. And only acknowledging gamma, the average disposition of cesium on soil. And Koriyama, the second row to your right, the middle row, 162,000 becquerels per square meter. And so rather than let the children, evacuate the children, the industry won't do that. And the teachers in desperation have to stack crates full of bottled water. There's nothing in history we can compare it to on top of that. It's safer to go to New York City, massive New York City, go to a dump for refuge from households that they just closed because it's full, dig a hole in the middle of it, and build a school there, and put children in that school in the middle of a dump in New York City is safer than the children 34 miles away in that school from Fukushima. So you'll see a lot of these pictures where, look how thick these paper suits are. Now they burn allegedly 7,000 of these suits each day. So I'm just not going to get into it. Okay, 2014. 2014. This is just one episode. This video is 20 times the speed. I'm going to multiply that. This is from TEPCO. What you're looking at is the reactor site, and you can see steam starting to rise up in the background. Now remember, this is at hundreds of times the normal speed I'm showing it to you. Now this radioactive steam is at least 10 sieverts an hour recorded in 6 places with permanent radiation monitors, but those monitors are limited to 10 sieverts an hour, which is a lethal dose immediately. So this steam that looks like steam is a lethal death plume, and so you cannot be on this site. There's no insects, animals, there's no mammals, no humans can survive going through the steam. Even Spider-Man or the Hulk went through that steam, they will die immediately. Ha ha ha. Right? And Spider-Man and the Hulk were created to disarm you and disenfranchise you from reality of this stuff by the industry itself. The same industry kept those children in those schools. This is so everything this coats is a lethal dose. And so this is 20 times the normal speed right here. And this went on for several years where they have to abandon the site. This is instant death. There's no way to survive 3-second encounter with this stuff. Okay, so the tanks, you can see they're prefabricated, a lot of them, and shipped into the site. Now the idea of the tanks, I got a prime example for you right here. Okay, so if this tank was full of the type of water that we're talking about, he couldn't survive. And you can't survive heavy exposure in a paper or a Tyvek suit. He has a rainy, like a plastic layer over him to protect his paper suits, because they burned them each day apparently. But if that tank was full, you could not survive right there. If these tanks were actually full, like they were claiming, you couldn't survive. You can see these are, by the way, bolted, which was considered by the people who were TEPCO to get approval October the 25th, 2015, to release more M-O-E-M-O-R-E, more water, 2015. TEPCO plans to dump the water store 2013. The plant has already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean. And they claim after water passed through the crippled units is processed through the SARI system to remove the cesium. The problem with the story, though, is the water is so radioactive, it's a lethal dose by the liter. And so therefore, you can't filter that because it's a lethal dose by the liter. And what they're doing is not acceptable in any circumstance. And the world has this one opportunity, And it's your responsibility, your obligation. You're obligated under your Bill of Rights, your Magna Cartas, your constitutions to be the checks and the balances. So 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation emitted from a single liter of so-called leaked water. So 5-gallon jerry can of it left at a subway station for 1,000 years. Every single person who walks past it dies that day. You can take it on a spaceship, fly it to another solar system, find another planet, inhabit it, and bring that down there. That'll exterminate all of them the same way. So paper suits, tanks full of water, people, and this is common pictures. This is nonsense. We've never seen a dirty suit, never seen a rip in a suit. On top of that, the list goes on and on. Like, try painting your house with a paper suit. See how that works for you. 2 sieverts of beta radiation. Now, they're not acknowledging the gamma, the alphas, the neutrons on top of that. So it's proof is that these tanks are empty because if you filled up one of the tanks, you actually couldn't build the other tanks, for starters. And you can't walk past the tank or within a proximity of the tank without getting a lethal dose. And when you have zero protection, and that's the animosity equivalent of zero protection, they also have somewhere between 30 million to 60 million one-ton bags throughout the country. Or Fukushima prefecture. 14 prefectures are highly radioactive, and the 15th one they don't include is Tokyo, which is highly radioactive. TEPCO investigate radiation levels of exhaust stacks. So that exhaust stack you're looking at there, it's a lethal dose, 25 sieverts per hour near the surface. What that means is you can't walk past that stack without dying immediately. And so how can you possibly fix or work on the reactors when you can't actually get near the stacks? Okay, so this is, you see up there with the whitish one is number one with a Kevlar sarcophagus they had on it for 5 years. It was brought in by cranes. You can see how big each of those panels are. And everything's done by crane. The panels are held by gravity. They're very heavy panels built off-site and assembled by cranes. This is the remains of reactor 3. And what they done was they built with cranes and killing who knows how many homeless and destitute and victims of society. They built now this was built off-site and assembled there. And the idea of that was also to deceive the population. That's allegedly reactor 3, but there's no left to it. I showed you earlier. That's the remains of reactor 4. Let me go back to this picture for a second. So you can't build those tanks if any of them are quarter full or half full or whatever the case may be. And you can fill up all 1,000 tanks 6 times each day with the normal flow of water a reactor would need. Okay, so 2013, so this is what's the remains of reactor 4. It's important to tell you the rest of the story. This was a 190-foot building, so it would have been above the top of the panels that they put there. So they built this off-site, and then they assemble it by the reactor. It doesn't physically touch the building. There's nothing inside of that. They put panels on it. That's all they done. This was also done by gravity. And then in 2013, they claimed TEPCO began critical work on unloading Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 spent fuel pool. So now they claim the destroyed building doesn't exist anymore and that it looks like this. And Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Caldercott, Christopher Busby, have claimed that is true, but it's not. And then the question is, why did they pixelate parts of the so-called cask on the bottom and the top? The United States have 70 of these exact reactors, by the way. So they just shot it in the United States by the looks of it. TEPCO began work removing the spent fuel from the cripple number 4 that is supposed to look like that. Hang on. Because it only takes one picture to tell the story. I can show you hundreds, but if I show you the right one, or 2 or 3, that tells the story a lot better. Okay, so how did it get to that stage right there? So it doesn't physically touch the building. You can see the panel right there, but that part is not paneled over above it yet. And as soon as they get the panels on it, they claim it looked like that inside of that up there. Now, the destruction is really something. And you can see me where I photoshopped myself with rocks into the holes as a reminder of the victims that it took to get to this stage. Then they rolled out the experts to convince you that don't worry about Dana, don't listen to Dana, listen to the expert. Arnie Gunnarsson and his wife, Maggot Gunnarsson, was a spokesperson, by the way, for the nuclear industry for 2 decades. But when they stripped down reactor 4, before they put structure alongside of it and the cantilever over it in order to manipulate the consensus, it actually looked like that. And so Arnie was pretending it looked like this when it actually looked like that. And so was Helen Caldercott and Christopher Busby and Greenpeace, by the way. And so 1,533 assemblies. 1,500. Now, the problem with Japan is that it doesn't have or any other country repository for nuclear fuel. I just gotta find my pictures of the fuel pools. Here we go. Because there's a lot going on. So before I can go any further, I got to explain that to you, just in case. So there's 2 fuel pools at the top of the building, plus the reactor core has 800 assemblies. Each assembly is around 1,800 pounds. It has 100 fuel rods that are 18 pounds each and 12 feet long, and which is roughly 720 tons. And then decades of those reactor cores for 4 decades stored at the top of the building. A total is actually around 10 million pounds. It's around 3,400 assemblies, say. So where did all the assemblies go to? Now, it was the same thing for reactor 3. The very top of the 190-foot buildings were 2 fuel pools. The reactor cores were, at the time, pure uranium, pure plutonium. So Chernobyl, for instance, and Sellafield, Windscale, these were graphite reactors, and they would put the uranium fuel rods into the graphite. Whereas these are pure uranium, pure plutonium. The scales are just absurd amount difference, and so media will commonly say Japan, the site of the world's worst nuclear, or Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident. So reactor 3, by the way, that's the official picture, as they've done the same thing with reactor 4, right? Where they pretend that it was perfect when it doesn't even exist. The same thing with reactor 3, and it doesn't even exist. They pretend that it's perfect. So they faked both of those buildings. That was 2013. That's the nuclear industry, not TEPCO. Not, that's the International Atomic Energy Agencies, the nuclear regulatory agencies for all countries that have nuclear, participated in the cover-up because they didn't speak out, and that every academic in the industry that knew better didn't speak out. Universities, the schools of mass destruction that got us into this mess in the first place, of course, done the same thing to us. And I don't know what the right word is, every discipline in every university, we've never heard them coming out and refute the blatant revolting lies. What we do hear is them coming out and perpetrating those lies. Each spent fuel assembly is made of about 80 fuel rods, which is not true, it's 100, which can be assembled and contains up to 7,500 trillion becquerels of radioactivity. This is not true either. I mean, it's infinitely worse than that. And for instance, gram of cesium is like 100 curies, and a curie is 37 billion atomic decays per second, sustained for a long past the human experience. And around 1% of plutonium by weight. So if we use their model, 80 times 18 pounds is 1,440 pounds per assembly, and 1% plutonium is 14 pounds per assembly. There's 1,311 assemblies according to them, which means there's 18,870.4 pounds of plutonium in just one building. Multiply that by the 4 buildings that were lost, and they're completely downplaying the quantity of fuel rods and assemblies in these buildings. It's a staggering amount. It's a stunning revelation, and you won't find that revelation certainly anywhere else where somebody has articulated it, unfortunately. Try to get it together. 2013 World Nuclear Industry Status Report. claims the full release of Unit 4 fuel pool without any containment or control could cause by far the most serious radiological disaster to date. Well, I mean, if you look at reactor 4 and reactor 3, it's obviously the fuel pools are long gone from, they were gone the first 4 days. And so it's hard probably for you to wrap your mind around that. Bear with me. This is a plume model of just a Xenon-133 radioactive fallout based on 20 days. And I put this connotation, Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming, because you can see a continuous plume. Now, gas, oil, and coal doesn't do that. They don't make plumes that covers the whole planet. So after another 10, 20 days, the rest of the planet is covered. So it's convenient for them to release this particular model from international agencies than it is for them to run the model where it actually finishes covering the planet. And this is just 20 days of fallout, my goodness. So it's pulsing energy at the speed of light of betas and alphas and neutrons and gamma, not just xenon, which burns a hole through your lungs, ends up in your bones, mutates stem cells of all the species. And so it's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. They can't mingle. So when they hit each other almost at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, they change direction. So imagine the braking effects. And this causes a special kind of X-ray that is devastating to every species. This is why you don't clean your windshield anymore. So, leak first reported in August. This is a distraction, is what you're seeing there. Leak first reported. The buildings have hemorrhaged. They're talking about 300 tons per day. This is a total deception. By the way, 300 tons is equal to 2 regular standard 5/8 size garden hoses running for 24 hours. It's absurd to suggest. First off, the reactors typically would need 1 million gallons per minute for 1,440 minutes a day. And when they melt down, they're going to be infinitely, they're going to go from 600 degrees Fahrenheit to 9,000. Fukushima Daiichi Unit 3 debris removal operation releases 280 billion becquerels per hour. Again, they're talking about a couple of grams a day. That's still frightening, these kinds of numbers, because the becquerel, the atomic decay per second, is so devastating to all species. And so it's infinitely worse. And I showed you Unit 3. I'll show it to you again. So this was the cover story. You can always see the 7,000 people in these pictures, right? See them? They're everywhere. Look at them. Hi, everybody. Look at them in the picture. The 7,000 people are highly visible. All these pictures in their paper suits. July the 29th, 2014, TEPCO, a non-decommissioning authority, says the groundwater bypass operations are not having an effect at the Fukushima Daiichi. And officials have admitted that groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce the tons of water from entering the crippled reactor buildings. Crippled. So, by the way, the groundwater bypass operation was supposed to stop the water from coming down the mountains and going through the plant. It didn't work, and they didn't even try, as far as I know. TEPCO 2014 says they're running out of room to store the contaminated debris. Now, this is contaminated on a whole different scale. Whoever that is in their paper suit probably wouldn't live a week. Tokyo Electric believes they can reduce 340,000 cubic meters of debris by burning it. Radioactive debris. So burning radioactive debris is dirty bombs, by the way, and other combustible materials. Well, everything on that site is just saturated with a very dangerous smorgasbord of isotopes. And crushing the again, this word contaminated, rubble to use to pave roads. Using radioactive debris to make roads. It just defies any concept of what humans are capable of. This is we're not supposed to be capable of doing something like that, see? We're supposed to be better than that, I would hope. Like if we put fifth graders in charge, they wouldn't do something like that. TEPCO unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control, 2014. Always standing around in their paper suits. The utility which operated the plant promised to treat all contaminated water by 2015. Now emitting can't be realized. And there's parts of the site that don't have full control. What the hell does that mean? Well, it means the lethal doses, like the stacks that are 25 sieverts an hour I showed you earlier. It's a lethal dose. You don't have control. You can't go near it. It's a no-go zone. There's no nuclear scientists have ever went to this site in 11 years that I've known of. There's no nuclear scientists have reported from this site. Tanks were built hastily to hold highly contaminated water, which led to leaks and related issues. Highly contaminated is not the way you should describe something like this. Is lethal by the leaders. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. 2014. The problem with the filters is once you put this highly lethal water into the filter, can't change the filter. The pipes now are so radioactive you can't step over the pipes. The system that's feeding water into it, you can't step over those pipes or hoses. You can't change the filter because it's a lethal dose. You can't pick it up and move it. You radiate everything on the way if you did. Robots can't survive in that environment, so you couldn't. Humans unequivocally can't survive in that environment, so they don't. So what they do is the nuclear industry submits criteria to the non-regulation authorities to dump contaminated rainwater. 2013. So this is, people hear the word contaminated rainwater. It doesn't quite resonate for what, if I was a murderer and I'm going to give you cyanide, I'd be like, here's some cyanide, or here, take this aspirin. Because they both look the same, see? Regulators urge TEPCO to dump the tritiated water into the Pacific Ocean. 2000, December. So when you hear the word tritiated water and nuclear meltdown, whoever says those words should be arrested immediately and should have their degrees taken away from them, and should probably be thrown off a skyscraper sooner than later. They're worthless humans. They abrogated their rights to be on the planet with us. They are seemingly just as unable to prevent the eventual release. Now, to call it tritium water in 2013, I can't possibly articulate how upset I am, because apparently it's illegal to say what I would say, as they are unable to prevent the daily outflow of extremely radioactive material. So tritium is not typically described as extremely radioactive material. Now, I just showed you that in 2014 the ALLL systems didn't work, so they didn't have tritium. Even if they did have a filtration system that could possibly work, they didn't. And Areva, of course, had their system there. They had the SARI system, allegedly for the cesium. That didn't work. And then the International Atomic Energy Agency, these ghouls, these incredible ghouls. And we got a poll tonight for the ghouls. Should the ghouls, also known as the IAEA and also known as the International Atomic Energy Agency, be disbanded and replaced immediately? They should be immediately jailed. Well, they should be brought to Fukushima and disposed of. They definitely don't have a right to be on our planet. This is our planet, not theirs. We're taking it back. In comparison, the dumping of the... And every time I say the word tritiated water, because I've been at this so long, I have these flashes, actual pictures, flashing through my head of James Conkra and Michael Schellenberg and Jerry Thomas, and just this endless bunch of goblins and demonic demons and ghouls. See, that's the strange thing about this, I find, with me. And so maybe I'm just weird, but I physically see things when I talk about it. But you don't. You can't see inside my head. So I've went through an absurd amount of trouble to put this whole operation together so you can see it too. So you can see it too. And there's nothing easy about it. If cargo ships at sea were found to be deliberately dumping normal waste overboard, they are banned from doing business in many major international markets. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? It seems that the continuous batch release of contaminated water will become standard operating procedures at Fukushima Daiichi facility, as long as TEPCO is allowed to remain in control. And TEPCO is not a decommissioning and decontamination organization or an authority in any of this whatsoever. And they are a nuclear operator. And their approach to mitigate and deal with the disaster both before and after March 11th is extremely telling. And so this is putting a monster. You know, if you had put an ad out and you went for a babysitter to babysit your children, and a man shows up at your door and he said, listen, I just got out of jail after 45 years for molesting 300 children, but I'm not going to do that no more. I learned my lesson. I need a job. Would you let them? You're like, yeah, you probably did. Would you let them watch your children? Because that's what TEPCO is. They're monsters. They're actual physical monsters. Jamaica revealed information, by the way, contamination on used cars from Japan. The last spot you want to buy a car from is Japan, folks. There's all kinds of evil corruption where they went in to the nuclear wasteland. A lot of brand new car lots were abandoned, and universities and schools and malls and banks and jewelry shops were completely abandoned, full of millions of dollars of inventory. And that was jacked by evil, despicable scum and then shipped to other countries. Oh, and Russia's the same thing. Jamaica, too many radioactive cars. Russia's got too many radioactive cars. I've covered a lot of those stories over the years. So that's a before and after so-called picture. We counted the tanks. There's 750 tanks. That's not a really good picture. If you had tanks that close together, and one of them, only one of each of those rows of tanks are full, you still can't get near any direction because you're talking about gamma shines, neutron bursts, alpha bursts. TEPCO shuts down the alll system at the Fukushima March the 19th, 2014, after contamination was found in storage tanks. This is the strangest story. This is like, what? Now, so they didn't want to tell you that the system is incredibly radioactive when they turned it on, because they knew that was going to happen. It's like the tanks, they're put there to deceive you into thinking that they didn't kill the Pacific and the planet. So workers, aka homeless and destitute and victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, found high levels of beta-emitting radioactive materials. Beta. What about the neutrons? Because if they talk about neutrons in the tanks, then it's easy, right, for even anybody that's slightly trying to understand the subject, that's going to cause a chain reaction. In 3 tanks used to store treated wastewater. Now, we're going to go back a step to this story, 2014. alll system did what later that year, you'll see headlines coming up, still hadn't worked. Neither did the Riva system. So there was no such thing as treated water. And other tanks used to transfer the fake treated water. Now, then it gets the most bizarre statement. All of these tanks must now be decontaminated before the alll system is brought back online. This is madness altogether. So the question is, why just use 3 other tanks as you would expect? Like, it's absurd to suggest you're going to decontaminate a tank that was used for radioactive water. It's absurd. Who gets that job? It can't be done, right? You got to pull all the dead bodies out every 15 minutes and send in another person. When this one drops dead, pick up the shovel, start digging. Pick up the grinder and start grinding. It's absurd. TEPCO nearly doubled contaminated water storage capacity by March 2016. This is April 7th, the next month, 2014. You see the people down there? If those tanks are full, you can't stand up there. You see the people on the tanks? You see that like orange stuff written on the tank there? There's people stood on that tank. If that tank is filled up with radioactive water, you can't stand on any of those tanks, no matter which tank is. If just one of those tanks is full, you can't stand there or you can't get close to it. Because that's how this stuff actually physically works, see? Right now, Tokyo Electric, the utility, which was, by the way, nationalized, is actually the Japanese government, which operates because they were on the stock market, which is just it's insane to have nuclear on the stock market. It's insane. NuScale, by the way, a few days ago, they're small modular reactors from Portland. These people are incredible scumbags from Fluor, which is part of the Manhattan Project, that company. I've personally had these people on the telephone. They're revolting. I actually had people call me up from the industry over the last few days and said they hope I die, laughing at me because I was sick. And that's what I expect from these people. Their parents in the future, when they're convicted of the crimes that they've done against humanity and ecocide and omnicide, their parents should be required to execute them with an ice pick to the top of their heads when they're legally convicted of being genocide monsters. Has enough tanks in sight to store 480,000 tons of highly radioactive water, storing highly radioactive water. But after having collected more than 430,000 tons of, now it's contaminated water, the storage tank capacity is 90% full. This week, TEPCO, the lunatics, committed to increasing the capacity of the tank's farms by 800 tons by 2016. Fukushima Prefecture requested in 2013 August that the Japanese government remove TEPCO from the management of the Fukushima Daiichi decommissioning. It's one of my favorite stories, by the way. It is no secret that Tokyo Electric is incapable of containing the disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi. So look at this with the IAEA taped on their back in paper suits. Does anybody in their right friggin' mind believe the International Atomic Energy Agency physically walked anywhere on this site? If you do, you're delusional, unfortunately, and you've been sucked in to the propaganda machine. But when I zoomed in on, because it happened to be a high-quality picture, I zoomed in and I seen paper. I literally almost cried. Japan may have to, and this is a frightening picture right here. Japan may have to change the nuclear industry, not Japan. Japan don't got no say in nothing. Japan's a victim too. But we have to draw a line. So it's better to sacrifice Japan than 8 million species in the rest of the planet, unfortunately. But that's the decision that should have been made. They should have sealed it off, and that was the end of it. Good luck. What do you need? We'll get it to you. But good luck. You got lots of smart people. You got lots of, they close, hear me out. They closed 500, or they closed 54, or 44, 52 nuclear power plants down. 52 reactors down. Or wait, no, there's 4 down. 50 reactors, 54 reactors. They closed 50. I'll get it right in a second. It's not my best day. So they closed down all these power plants with thousands and tens of thousands of employees. Not a single one volunteered to go to Japan, and not a single one went to Fukushima Daiichi. A series of articles detailing some of the lax procedures and oversights which have allowed radioactive debris to be dumped into the environment instead of being properly stored. I would have to do probably a 2-week, 4-hour-a-day show to actually cover the documentation that I'm able to, that I already have gathered up. But imagine if I just set my mind to that for 2 weeks, how much I can actually dig up. You'll be shocked. You'll actually be shocked that it's just, I got so much to cover. But one of the next major 2 or 3 shows down the road is going to be on physics.org. My goodness. Just my goodness. Sadistic and twisted and demonic. According to the Fukushima Labor Board, only 10% of some 1,800 jobs offered for decontamination work were filled. 10%. 180 of the 1,800 jobs were filled. They attributed the low number to fear over radiation exposure. In reality, wages for the work are the same as those for regular construction. In reality, it was around $11 US a day to work at the nuclear meltdown. $11. So can you imagine nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear university students, or nuclear corporations saying, Japan's only paying us $11 a day, our employees. How are we supposed to work with only $11 a day? Or imagine your child crying to you because he's seen a nuclear scientist in one of the propaganda messages at his school saying, nuclear scientists are only getting $11 a day. Japan failing to live up to pledge to accept outside assistance and global expertise in the wake of... No, they weren't failing to live up to the pledge. It was 100%... Like if they actually accepted the global expertise, do you think they would have actually went to Fukushima? You think nuclear scientists from around the world would actually go to Fukushima? Is there actually anybody on the planet that gullible that they would think that nuclear scientists would go to these nuclear meltdowns? Just the thought of it is, yeah, no, I can't see that. In reality, the wages for the workers are the same as those for normal construction. I guess having problems here, ain't I? Half of the workers may be legally contracted, says TEPCO. Oh, I mean, if it was only half of it, that would be terrible, I'm sure. And these are pictures I see constantly. 16-foot by 10-foot sheets of steel, 1-inch steel plates cover everything. And they usually pave over that eventually. Whenever the steam comes out of whenever they have an earthquake, they'll have huge emissions. I just don't mind. My apologies for not keeping framing. I'm doing the best I can. Sue me. You've brought a nuclear scientist in there. The second they seen this, they'd reach across you, kick open the door, shove you out, get in the seat, crack it to the mat, and they would ram the gate on the way out. If anybody got in their way, they'd run them over. There's zero possibility you'll get a nuclear academic or a nuclear scientist. Formhead calls for answers in Japan's plan to dump nuclear waste 2021. Everything is downhill. Look, this is all they've done. They've never done nothing but dump it. They can't, the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants, bless their hearts, who don't speak the language, have no concept of what they're doing there. These are people desperate for a day's wage, and a lot of them have been abused. And once you get there and you get a solid dose of radiation, there goes your willpower, right, to resist. It's such an evil entity, the nuclear industry. It defies logic that the world has not gone to war against these people. Every university with nuclear classes in it is a mortal enemy of every human and every species on this planet. Japan's Prime Minister at 2021 had said dumping the water is unavoidable. And I showed you earlier in 2013 where the same Yoshida Suga said that it was unacceptable. Put a $5,000 suit on him and cut your throat. So 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2014, they had 1,200 tanks. 2017, they had 900 tanks. 2019, they had 1,000 tanks. And 2021, last year, 1,000 tanks. 2022, 1,000 tanks. By the way, burning debris from Fukushima. As a result, not only the Fukushima people have inhaled the radioactive nanoparticles, but the entire planet has. The map below from the year 2012 showed the locations of dirty bombs being burned, and it spread over Japan during the first 3 years, 2011, 2012, 2013. What you're looking at is all the spots where they ship the radioactive debris and burn it. Try making that up on your own. That's scarier than every horror show from Hollywood combined. Multiplied it by infinity. That's the scariest. That's the most ludicrous. That's the most unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable. Nobody on the planet would do something like that. I can understand people not accepting what I'm showing them. Not really, but I can imagine I can understand some people not being able to comprehend it, going, there's no way that there are people that evil on our planet. TEPCO failed to deliver and promised to install a fence to restrict the contamination. So I'm going to go into details on a few of these stories that I briefly touched on. They didn't install the fence because it was going to cost $1 billion. And TEPCO would rather not spend the money, even though, look, if you built a fence, then the radiation piles up and you can't get near anywhere where that fence is going to be. TEPCO admits the ice wall won't stop the groundwater from entering the buildings. They had 260,000 people work on an ice wall. Rather than build a real wall, because why would you build a real wall where you can just walk away, Dana? Like, the idea of the ice wall is to deflect water. But what it ends up doing, of course, is radioactive water from liquefaction will congregate on the wall. So one of your first problems now is you can never go near these spots again. You can never dig into something like that again, for instance. And they spend $12 million a year maintenance for the wall, for just to run the pumps and everything. Like, the right solution is to come up with a better solution. if you are going to build a wall, the last thing you're going to build is an ice wall. Literally, the last thing you want to build is an ice wall. You would build a real wall. But a real wall would be stupid too, because the radiation now is going to pile up there. They allegedly 260,000 people worked on it. So the money that was located to it meant that if you paid 260,000 people, try wrapping your mind around that deception, they got paid around $1,100 each if you don't build a wall, if you don't buy any material. All you do is give 260,000 people $1,100 each. That chewed through your money that they use for the wall. So when you scrutinize what they say, it makes you ashamed that any university actually exists. I'm ashamed of every university on this planet. I'm humiliated by every professor that exists on our planet. They're professional lawyers, professional murderers. They're not professors. You know, I have a folder once in a while I bring out, not tonight, professors and doctors convicted of crimes. And because there's not that many professors, you know, worldwide, it's just shocking. And the crimes are always like, what the hell, man? That's evil times evilness. They admit the walls won't even work and is technically incapable of blocking off the groundwater. It's not sad, it's not pathetic, it's horrifying. On top of that, 2014, TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operation is not working. They're supposed to build another wall where they direct the water towards pumps, and pumps would push it into the ocean. This is water running down the hill towards the plant to stop it mixing and becoming immediately and carrying the radiation onward towards the ocean. Like, they built it to do that, by the way. They built it on top of an old river, which means it's existed for millions of years, bed. And so the idea is the reactor melts down and lands on the riverbed, and then the water still runs, because they built it there on purpose, and it washes the radiation to the ocean, and that's their old shit plan. That's their old crap. The whole industry, legally the whole industry should be just jailed and then work out the crimes they committed after. TEPCO says they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation will have an effect. In June, it was forced to admit the ice wall intended to control the flow was also unsuccessful. It's unable to bring the contaminated water under control. There's parts of the site they don't even have control of. And advanced liquid processing systems, ALPS, at late 2014 didn't work. Records levels found in the fish off the coastline. Japan working to speed up the decommission. That's probably the scariest words you can ever hear. 2013 on top of that. Workers being paid $11 a day, US. $11 a day. $11 a day. In Fukushima City, which wasn't evacuated, but 400,000 people were supposed to be, was told to evacuate. The mayor said, no, we're not going to tell them to evacuate. 90,000 houses are eligible for decontamination. You can't decontaminate a radioactive house. In the Gulf War with Iraq, well, it wasn't really a war, it was a genocide. 300,000 at a bath party. That probably needed some killing anyway, but that was still a genocide what the Americans done, and the British, where they used depleted uranium munitions on the road out of Kuwait. They just slaughtered all of them with the loot full of gold. They robbed gold shops and jewelry shops and stuff like this, and BMW dealerships. They were taking everything with them when they left Kuwait. And I had listened to a lot of the soldiers' side of what happened there. And so the Ba'ath Party had a lot of conscripted soldiers in trenches. They had dug the trenches with bulldozers, and conscripted soldiers, they had their shoes taken away from them so they couldn't run away. Because you're in the desert, you ain't going to run away with no shoes, right? 140 degrees, you ain't running through the desert. And Americans came through with bulldozers with plows on them, just buried in the holes. And the soldiers came right behind them. And so the soldiers were walking past these now bulldozed trenches, and there was arms and hands waving, and just flopped over, where they suffocated, right? But they were still alive, and the soldiers, a lot of different soldiers from different divisions had talked about it in it. But the rule for radio, because Saddam was accused of having radioactive material back then, and if they had have found just a sliver of radiation, they were supposed to build a 900-foot perimeter around it, not touch it, 900-foot perimeter around it, then build a 12-foot fence around it, and put universal signs on it of radiation danger. So when they talk about cleaning up so-called decontamination, it's just absurd, of 90,000. You know, if I send you out to knock on 90,000 doors, how long do you think that's going to take you? If I send you out to deliver, you got to go physically deliver 90,000 flyers to 90,000 houses. How long do you think that's going to take? So imagine the thought of, you know, the people that they're claiming is going to do decontamination don't have the qualification for it. These are not educated in any facet of the industry, because they would immediately run the other direction. Fraud wall. That's hilarious, man. James Lucid called it the fraud wall. I got to do a t-shirt on that one down the road. Don't make me laugh tonight, man. I'm a bit too much for me. Let me get back on track here. Japan is paying them $11 a day to go to a nuclear debt zone. So, I mean, everybody in the nuclear industry should have their throats pulled out for that one. Not physically, but literally. See how I've done that? $11 US a day. I don't know a single person will work for $11 US a day. Like, if this was all nuclear students, I'd be like, that's a little bit too much, isn't it, for these degenerate scumbags? $11 a day? That's a lot of money for a nuclear scumbag. But for the victims of society, to give them $11 per day to go into a nuclear wasteland, I'd kill that person who was doing this for sure. And I'm not a murderer, but that's not murder to get rid of the person doing that. That's a responsibility, isn't it? So 4,000 houses has been cleaned. Oh, yeah. And then the next day, you got to come back and clean it again. The next day, you got to come back and clean it again because the radiation followed. Fukushima City is an unbelievable amount of radiation. Did we cover it earlier? Never mind. I got it here. So per square meter in Fukushima City, is 230,000 of just gamma and just cesium. How can it, like, you're supposed to plow down every structure in Fukushima City. Dig up all the sidewalks, all the pavements, every telephone pole, everything. And then in a couple of thousand years, maybe you can start rebuilding there. Like, the world doesn't understand evil until they look at nuclear. It's probably impossible for the average person to comprehend the evilness of each of this, what I'm trying to articulate. Let me go back one. But being able to prevent the releases of radioactive material from the crippled, and I showed you the pictures earlier, that's a crime, they call it crippled. The Fukushima Daiichi reactors have been dispersed across the country, reaccumulating on previously decontaminated areas, even houses that have been worked on previously will, not may, but will require. The Americans flew over Japan. They're only looking for gamma and iodine at that. And a 20-kilometer zone was 3 million becquerels per square meter from 1,000 feet up above the ground between April the 2nd and April the 3rd, 2011. So, like, everything I'm showing you tonight, this is unbelievably valuable, that tells the story, and that debunks the official story, right? So, like, you can take anything I'm using here to court, and it can be used in court. Everything I'm giving you, you have no concept of how much I actually have, by the way. So what I give you is pretty solid. It's pretty bulletproof. Here's another deception. What you're looking at, these are bladders, big bladders. And they're supposed to be full of that incredible radioactive material. Now, the problem with this story, and I'll explain it to you, is if that's full of radiation, you can't get up and walk on that. If those tanks were full of that radiation that we already were able to show you, you can't get that close, let alone on top of those so-called bladders. The bladders are there to deceive you and manipulate you. 60 meters long, 53 meters wide, 6 meters deep, 18 feet deep. 3 layers of waterproof sheets. Waterproof sheets. That's so laughable because we're talking about nuclear. At 6,000 becquerels a cubic centimeter. A cubic centimeter. This is absurdness. So 6,000 becquerels a cubic centimeter. I can't remember what the number is, 6 million per liter or something. Again, no one knows what the frig they're talking about when they just give you this random number. Because they're notorious for only including gamma and nothing else. Claiming they're going to use pumps to transfer from the tanks to storage pits. Those hoses, the roads where the hoses are on, are so radioactive. This was true, which is not. And we know it's not true because they're stood on top of the bladders. If at 6,000 becquerels per cubic centimeter, you are not walking on it. Yeah, Dana, but it has 3 layers of waterproof sheets, Dana. Yeah, but curium isotope for alone needs lead shielding 20 times thicker. You know, lead, not waterproof shielding, but lead shielding 20 times thicker than the lead shielding you do for plutonium after it goes through a chain reaction. So the fact that they're walking on it is proof that it's not, right? So the idea is the world sees this, is fed this image in thousands of medias at the same time from the same author with the same paragraphs and the same pictures worldwide, and everybody has this moment worldwide without context. But I mean, the fact that they mentioned 6,000 becquerels per cubic centimeter, my God, man, my goodness. You got to realize what this site is actually like. You remember that little video I showed you earlier? The death plumes. Like, you run and you don't stop. You just keep going for a couple of 100 kilometers. You don't look back. You just move as fast as you can. You cannot survive. You cannot survive that environment. That's lethal beyond anything the typical human can comprehend. More contaminated water, Fukushima Daiichi reported. Underground storage pits. So I've done some math for you on this. Some 290,000 becquerels radiation per cubic centimeter. 290,000 becquerels per cubic centimeter. And this was because they had used 22 liters and ended up with 6.3 billion becquerels without articulating what that would have been, which meant that each liter is 286 million. So each liter inside of that with three waterproof layers. And that's the gallows laugh because it's so ridiculous. Each liter is 286 million atomic decays per second at the 186,000 miles per second each. You don't stand on that. You've seen the videos of people running across fire pits. You don't even do that. It's a sad day, anyway. Japan government to fund an underground wall as more criminal charges are filed against TEPCO. And whenever I see these kind of pictures, see all that weird plume? It's a weird plume there in the air. And the wall's going to cost $470 million. Traditionally, frozen walls have normally been installed and used for a couple of years at most. Let me go back here for a second. 470 million. There was 260,000 people. So how does that work? 470 million divided by 260,000 victims that worked there allegedly. And that would equal $1,800 each. So if they don't actually build a wall or buy the material, everybody made $1,800 each. You could have built the wall for probably $2 million or $3 million. What a strange plume. So in the meantime, contaminated water will continue to leak out. When I hear the word leak, it's like having a seizure, like a brain seizure. Your brain is like, how can you use that word? How can you get that low that you would use that particular word? How can you be that? And like, for the last week and a half, I have been listening to the original press releases from the Prime Minister's office in Japan for March and half of April, and a couple of other random ones. And I got to chop these videos up. We're going to have to go through every one of these videos because you have the propaganda machine actually lying. And the interesting thing about those is they don't show you a single picture a single time. They don't show you a single video a single time. That's the strangest, most amazing press release you'll ever see. They don't show you a single picture. They talk about Fukushima, so March the 14th, March the 15th, March the 16th, and on. They don't bother showing you. When they say reactor 3, they do not show you a picture of reactor 3. When they say they're doing something on the shoreline, even though if you go into my playlist, you'll see they did eventually release 1,900 plus pictures, and I covered them late last year. They're in my playlist. I actually feel a bit better that I'm doing the show tonight. I'm glad I've done a show tonight. Under a lot of stress because I wasn't sure if I was going to survive what happened to me, and I can't switch off, right? And I don't have any help. And so I felt lost this week. This week I felt completely lost and felt abandoned on top of that because I didn't have anybody in no way, because we have this huge operation. We can't keep it running for starters. And so everything I got is about doing the maintenance at this stage on this whole operation so it can do the job when necessary. And it's been a really lonely week for me. It was a heartbreaking because I didn't know if I was going to survive this week or not. And when my stomach got kinked, because that's apparently what was going on, or my bowels or intestines, I should say. It was a new Dana was born. I can guarantee you, because I feel I got another lease on life. I got another opportunity to come out and curb stomp the nuclear industry. I really do, right? And I'm very grateful, and because that's all that matters to me, is that somebody, when the nuclear industry watches my video, they find me and they say, well, debunk that piece of shit, blah blah blah, because that's what they call people like us. I can frig them up for the rest of their lives, see? Because they're not going to find holes in my game. And they're stuck with the truth all of a sudden. It's not something they've ever faced before. It's not something they've ever encountered before either. It's something they avoid at all costs, right? I wish I was healthy. I can go punch the shit out of every one of them rather than do what I'm doing, but I'm not. It's better to create 1 million people that are articulated and will eventually hunt them down and exterminate them. Not in the literal sense, but in the sense of they won't be able to hide from the truth anymore. When they talk about 1,000 tons of groundwater rushes into the complex every day, that's up, is it like 1,000 tons? If you look at a small river, try imagining what 1,000 tons is. It's about 1 minute at best. Every minute, see, not every day. TEPCO ice wall operation not meeting expectations? No, because it's the fraud wall. Again, you see these steel plates everywhere. This is 260,000 people. Look at them. And the one thing about my operating system that if I click, see if I got 900 things loaded and I click and pull the mouse a little ways, it'll drop me down to the very last one. So then I gotta go back and find my spot, which is what just happened to me. Okay, we're in a rundown to the final here now. I am definitely exhausted, but I just wanted to at least do what I'm doing. Like, it has to get, somebody has to come out and curb stomp humanity in the common sense, because you can't talk them into it. You got to come out and physically abuse them in the common sense. Like, all you're going to get from the industry is lies, but if you can read between the lines, then you get the horror. So a 320 million project in this version. So if you divide that by 260,000 employees, then it's 1,100, I think. Let me do the math just for pun. Because maybe that's what I'd done with the original number. What was it again, Dana? 320 million. So 320 million divided by 260,000 employees. Yeah, it was $1,200 each if you don't buy the ice wall. If you don't build the ice wall. Because the official narrative is 260,000 employees, right? The minute you scrutinize their version, none of it makes sense. TEPCO admits they can't form the ice wall. I mean, you had 80 kilometers of coastline. That it was 2,000 square miles, the size of Texas, was in the Pacific a couple of years after. So before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, not counting alpha and betas and neutrons emitters, by the way, because you can't, again, they're trying to make you believe, and they have for most of the population, if not all of it, except that it's just cesium. So the nuclear industry, the International Atomic Energy Agency's nuclear regulatory authorities, they shouldn't be allowed to have children, for sure. And they certainly shouldn't be allowed to talk to humans anywhere on the planet in a position of authority, because they're perpetual monsters to do something like this. And the reason being is just one hot particle can cause a cancer, but a cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries, illnesses that will manifest from radiation, cancer. So children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. Canada removed all restrictions after 1994 that very few people, unless you come here, you'll never catch something like I'm showing you. You will never find this stuff anywhere else on the planet, unfortunately, in a package or talked about. Inhaling just a hot particle can induce cancer or heart problems or liver or lung or respiratory or pituitary or thyroids or adrenaline or Alzheimer's or dementia or autism. Fukushima girls have 3 times more thyroid cysts, which are tumors, over 50 millimeters than boys, and 79% more larger tumors than boys. So this is applicable to all the species, not just humans. Fukushima government, over 35% of young people tested have thyroid tumors started. Human embryos, United States, likely bioaccumulating radiation. Strontium, cesiums. And when cesium enters the body, 75% of it ends up in the muscle tissue, including the heart. And there's one community in a single month in Fukushima Prefecture where there's 12,700 people extra people died in a single month of heart attacks. And the industry is out there with full control of your universities, complete control of your TV and your medias. Cesium-137 immediately damages the heart muscle. You know, when I moved into this new studio, it came with a package. And it was free TV for a whole year. And I couldn't get the lower price and the high 1.5 terabytes a second bandwidth unless I took the package. So I took the package. But I've never ever turned on the box. As soon as they went out the door, I unplugged it. I was like, oh my God, that was on in my house. Who knows what they got done to me now. Cesium immediately damaged the heart. Xenon known to cause dramatic increases in lung cancer or respiratory illnesses, right? Turns into cesium. Here's the plume of. This is just a 20-day plume. Is the increase in baby deaths in the United States a result of Fukushima fallout? 35% spike in infant mortality in the northwest cities since the meltdowns. Is iodine-131 killing babies in Philadelphia? Deaths are up 48%. Infant mortality up 48% since radiation levels spiked in the tap water in Philadelphia. This is absurd. You're supposed to get rid of all the piping system in Philadelphia or evacuate everybody in Philadelphia. By the way, tritium rain to result from disposal of Fukushima contaminated water. You may be interested to know that radioactive rainfall occurs around nuclear plants during normal operation. Radioactive rainfall, particularly once it's been running for a while and you put fuel in the fuel pools, they're boiling off radiation, still splitting the atom. That gets sucked into the water and that boils off about 120,000 liters a day into the environment. 23% higher incidences of childhood leukemia. Autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, all skyrockets around these places. When you close down a nuclear power plant, one of the first things you see is infant mortality rates drop. %43% of the victims' children have thyroid abnormalities, which is permanent. That's for the rest of your life. And what happens to your thyroid is it sucks up all the radiation, like gamma, that it can, and that's converted into radioactive hormones. Like, that's true for all the species, but it's absurdly, it's monstrously insidious, the effects of that radioactive hormones. It's absurdness. It's absurdness. How did our poll go tonight? 100% says that the International Atomic Energy Agency should be disbanded and replaced immediately. And that's the correct answer. Oh, I feel good we got a show back in. Looks like we got censored. And that happens when you put the truth out there. Dana and Asana. Good night, Dana. I'm going to do a shout out tonight. That'll make me feel better for sure. And I feel better, folks. Okay, I'm on the road to recovery big time. I went out yesterday evening, and remember how this all started. I was out scrubbing the tarps that we had used on the bird expedition. And I had to leave them out there, and I don't want to do that because if it rains on them, one of them is a canvas, an expensive canvas tarp for the quad trailer to stop dust and water from penetrating inside the trailer, because we carry all of our equipment inside of that, right? And so it's important that I always keep that like impeccably clean, because I can't have that happen. And I had no problems yesterday going out, taking that down, folding it up and putting it away. And that actually made me happy. And it wasn't an issue. I'm still gun shy now. It's going to take me a little while to get my confidence back, because I didn't know if I was going to survive this week. I really didn't. And the only thing important to me is doing what I do. Is doing the research. It's unbelievably important to me, and gutting the nuclear industry every chance I get. Because you're not really left with another. You can't talk about the nuclear industry without contempt. Like it has no redeeming qualities. So whatever. Let me do a shout out for everybody. Darlene, Albert, Timo, good night, everybody. Let me do a quick one. James Lucet, and then when I done my last show last week, James had donated 160, which was a big deal. Turned out to be a real bigger deal because I got so sick, and that's huge. And then Stephen Young, somewhere along last week or so, donated 50, and that was huge. Because without that, we had nothing. And when you're really sick like me, it's bad enough because I'm not very healthy as it is, but to have what happened to me was a pretty traumatizing event for me. You know, it takes a community to put an athlete out into the world, so to speak. It takes a country to put someone like me out, or to fight this industry. It'll take a country's effort going in hardcore against the nuclear industry to defeat it. So in the hopes that we can educate enough people that there's a catalyst somewhere along the way, that a country comes to their senses and says, hey, we got to go to war. And we can win this war. We don't have to fire a shot. And that it's the most worthy war anybody can ever fight, is the nuclear industry. Everybody has an obligation on this planet to fight this industry. Andrew B., every time it says Canada, it buffers. Not surprises me anymore. Someone says it's buffering bad, but it didn't show up on my end. Right? It doesn't show up on my end, right? Because I'm watching it all the time here. But normally I'll get a big red banner saying low bandwidth. And like I told you, I have almost 1.5 terabytes per minute bandwidth. I'm on a fiber optic cable with the extreme speeds. So because we're talking about the nuclear industry, we're talking about the tanks. And I'm doing the tanks tonight because it's such an important topic. And you know, yesterday morning when I woke up, I had gas from here and gas from down there all day long yesterday. That was huge. Like it was only 2 or 3 seconds at a time, but it kept showing up. And I've only, I woke up this morning, literally I felt like I had starved to death because I've drank 2 cups of soup, very small cups, mostly the broth, and 2 cups of stew with very little stew, mostly the broth, in the last 5 days since Saturday. Hopefully tomorrow I can have a real meal. Patrick, Peaceware, Port Angeles. I'm just zipping up through the names right quickly now because I forgot what I was supposed to do here. Just a quick shout out to those who managed to find me early because the show was early. Stacy, but I mean, YouTube doesn't notify most people. Just regulars. Conrad. I'm going to come right back down. Kevin Blanche. I'm going to come right to the most recent comments, and just in a couple 2 minutes maybe. I'm just still scrolling up. I'm picking up the pace here, but quick shout out to anybody I see there. Nailhead, Thinker, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's something happen in the replay. Remember, they extend all of my videos. Colette, Jerry Goldstein, Don Vincent, the blog. Okay, I'll come down to the most recent comments. Byron, Vivian Black, thank you. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Hope you're doing well, honey. We had sold a few more shirts, too. Because Tripwise, yeah, never got notified. Ed, you're welcome, Ed. I also wanted to do a show so everybody know that I'm back, particularly the nuclear industry too, that I'm back, and I ain't going to be gentle like I was before. Rock Nemeth, you're welcome, everybody. Just remind everybody, you don't need to thank me. Just get educated the best you can. Nobody needs to thank me. Like, this is Dana. As pathetic as it is, this is Dana. Tripwise has a song. I'm fine, folks. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not used to sitting in this. This is a great chair. This chair has done me just really well. And we bought this chair because I had a broken back, right? My back was shot and I couldn't stay in the chair. Yeah, you know, I just wish I could do more for this planet. And the best I can do is help educate the planet. Right? This is the one thing I can do for sure is educate. Okay, that's it for Dana. So all goes well. I'm going to be back on Sunday night. Sunday night, hopefully, we should do our last research expedition on birds, because I got almost, well, I think I got everything ready to go. I haven't looked at it for over a week now, and we got to get that video out there. There's been nothing else in the media about it. We'll see what happens on Sunday. We'll do a show on Sunday, though. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up when you find me later and you make it this far. Bless your heart for making it this far. See everybody soon. There is links below. I could desperately use a few donations to try to get a few things to make myself more comfortable. Just to finish the recovery. I got a while to recover from this. And because we burned through everything we got on maintenance and equipment. I got caught out this time, and I didn't, like anybody, you don't expect. My health went from okay to holy shit, I'm in serious trouble in less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes. Right, so your life changes. And I actually didn't dream that I would do another show, and so I'm thrilled that I done this show tonight, and I feel good about it, and I can't wait to do another one. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday night at the regular time. I done it early tonight because I wanted to go to bed early tonight. I'm still recovering, but we'll be back on regular time. Hugs everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.